thousands of patriots gather in Stockholm, marching and chanting, "Crush Islam, out of Sweden." In Stockholm, Sweden, we see yet another blatant display of anti-Muslim protest today. A far-right group staged a demonstration in Sweden, making their demands clear by chanting slogans such as "We don't want Muslims in our country" or "Crush Islam, out of Sweden." Today, we are taking a closer look at a recent Islam-related protest that just took place in Sweden, a country that is known for its tolerance. You will be surprised to learn that this is not the first, or will it be the last you will see from Sweden. This demonstration took place in Odenplan, and the group marched towards Segelstorg Square. Their demands are clear: to impose a ban on Islam in Sweden. This movement is countered by another protest, organised by the Stockholm Antifascist Association. This organisation stands against discrimination and racism, and they operated in the same area where the far-right group protested. They came armed with their own slogans and chants like "Everyone has the right to live in Sweden," "There are no illegal people," or "No to racism in our streets." Tension flared up between the two groups, though police intervention stopped both groups from escalating into an all-out brawl. But how long will this tension last? We may be looking at a pile of haystacks dripping in oil, waiting for a random spark. This is hardly an isolated incident, however. Though Sweden once stood as the symbol of multiculturalism, the country witnessed a never-seen-before level of tension between ethnic groups both in the country and abroad. For instance, just last summer, Ankara, Beirut, Islamabad and Jakarta saw a number of demonstrations where the Swedish flag was burned. We saw the same thing occurring in Lebanon and Iraq, except things got violent. Protesters threw Molotov cocktails and some even attempted to enter the country's embassies. But the worst scenario so far happened in Brussels, where 2 Swedish football fans were murdered. The 2 men were in the city to watch a football match between Belgium and Sweden and were murdered by a man who was said to have been inspired by the Islamic State. That incident, among many others, caused the Swedish government to advise citizens to exercise caution when travelling abroad, which is a surprising piece of news for many. After all, the country is known for having generous migration policies. Some point to one cause behind this level of hostility: the burning of Quran. It has happened many times in public. Such an act is protected under free speech, but one can see how Muslims are angered by this. The first recorded case of the sacred text going up in smoke happened in Denmark back in 2010, and such desecrations have been occurring more frequently, especially in Sweden. It all started by a Danish-Swedish dual citizen, Rasmus Paludan. You may be familiar with this figure, who saw the Islamization of European societies and works tirelessly to reverse this trend. He was trained as a lawyer, but is now head of a Danish party called the Hardline, or Hartstram, though he was barred from filing candidacies. So, he turned to Sweden to remind everyone of what was happening in Europe. By that point, Sweden was already mired in immigration-related issues and controversies. In 2020, Paludan burned a Quran in Rosengarten, a district of Malmö, where the inhabitants are mostly foreign, and that little display saw an upsurge in violence in this so-called peace-loving community. Paludan was eventually banned from entering the country, but he found emulators such as Salwan Momika. Paludan used his dual nationality to continue his activities and went on an election tour, though the Muslims reacted negatively, even violently in some cases. You may recall the opening of the Eid al-Adha festivities back in June last year. It opened with the burning of the Quran, and it triggered a protest among the League of Arab States and the OIC, who pointed out how intolerable the Swedish justice has been tolerating such an act. In response, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, and other Muslim countries called for a boycott of Sweden, or even revenge. Back in May, the Swedish permitted another protest involving the burning of the Quran. While this was completely under the protection of free speech the Western world is so known for, the Muslim communities took offence. Quran burning protests in Sweden strained the diplomatic relations between Stockholm and many countries. For instance, the Organisation for Islamic Cooperation, OIC, said that there should be political and economic measures against Denmark, Sweden, and other countries that allowed the burning and desecration of this holy book. Meanwhile, elsewhere in countries where Muslims are the majority, they expressed their disdain calmly by, you guessed it, angry protests and attacks on diplomatic missions. A completely proportional response to the burning of the Quran. Denmark already bent its knees by adopting a law last December, making it illegal to burn copies of the Quran in public places, and Sweden is expected to follow suit soon after due to national security concerns. The OIC pointed out that it is important to stop acts that can be classified as aggression that spreads hatred and contempt for religions and threaten global peace, security and harmony. That is something to chew on, as for a religion that is centered on peace, their volatile religious practitioners had quite a violent response to the burning of the Quran. You definitely will not get the same response if you burn the Bible. You may get a few glares, but that is probably the end of it. In a video here, you can see another protest staged by the Muslims, chanting things like, "Allah is the greatest, and there is no God but Allah." Meanwhile, a large group of people chanting, "Crush Islam out of Sweden," and "No to Islam" elsewhere in the country. One video recently surfaced on X, formerly Twitter, showing a woman publicly burning a Quran while holding a cross and chanting Hallelujah. It is also worth highlighting again that the Muslims could have responded by burning the Bible. It holds the same significance to Christians as the Quran after all. And yet, they did not. Some protested, but others turned to violence. They could have solved this differently, but they turned to the very thing they know best: violence. It is difficult to say where this will end up, but you can bet that tension will continue to rise. As for the legality of burning Quran, it is a difficult topic to discuss as it is a slippery slope. There is a lack of legal arsenal to stop it, because laws against blasphemy and defamation of religion were struck down over 50 years ago. Then, there are two relevant articles of the country's criminal code where vexatious behaviour and incitement to racial hatred can be punished. For the second bit, the current interpretation is that insulting a religion is not the same as discrimination against an ethnic group. Enforcing a ban on burning the Quran is a very slippery slope. After all, there are a ton of religious symbols, even the prayer rug. So is the burning of a carpet considered to be a crime too? Let it be clear that laws must be enforced equally. It is only fair, right? So, the punishment for burning the Bible should carry the same punishment as the burning of the Quran. As of now, the Swedish police stand neutral and allow both parties to express themselves honestly. When the law goes into effect, which group do you think will get preferential treatment? You may assume that the law will never be passed, but something similar has already happened in the past. It is worth noting that, while freedom of speech has been a pillar of Sweden's identity since the 1700s, recent legislation heavily limited its scope. It is forbidden by a law passed in 1933 to wear clothing that shows your political affiliation. Back in 1996, a man was convicted because he donned a Swedish flag with mythological figures and Valhalla etched on it. Then, just last decade, another man took a heavy fine and 6 months in prison for posting an artwork of the hanging of 3 coloured individuals as if it was the aftermath of a lynching. As of now, these clashes only serve to harden both positions. The Sweden Democrats strive for tolerance, but it is hard to see how far they can get before it all comes crashing down. The government is trying to appease both sides, And that is an unenviable position. That at least we can all agree on. We can also agree that the government may have to take a side soon, and we will see which group they genuinely care about. The people who built this country, or outsiders. And that is all we have for you today. Please click like and share this recent development with your friends and family so they are caught up with everything that is going on in Sweden. Subscribe to stay up to date with all the going-ons and hit that bell icon to be notified when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again in the next video.